If I were to put a list together of heart qualities, character qualities, on my list, 3 of the really important ones are self-respect, because it guarantees I want the other qualities, self-control, because it guarantees I can use the qualities, and respect for others, because it motivates me, again, to use the qualities, because life is not about me, it's about relationships I have and honoring people.
Sometimes I ask the big questions like, what actually are my targets with parenting? There's some different people that put lists together and give you insights. And especially as we start a new year, it's natural for us to really highlight different things that we think our kids should have or things that we want them to want in this time of their development. For some of us, that's really hard to pull together, and it's hard to know who we should listen to. Today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, Dr. Kathy actually looks at this head on, kind of helps us understand a little bit of the value of character qualities, and does it in a way that helps give light and courage to us as parents without being afraid of the dark. So let's turn now to Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, the late pastor, Dr. Adrian Rogers, warned parents that institutional training of kids is something to kind of be monitored. As he did this, he kind of listed 21 critical qualities that every parent should want to pass along to their son or daughter specifically. He actually kind of wrote these to dads, but I think it relates to all of parenting. The list of 21 qualities includes things like contentment and courage, courtesy, discernment. I mean, it's a list of 21 qualities of the kind of Christian qualities that we find highlighted through Scripture. Now, I have to tell you, I kind of bristle at lists like this. It might be my millennialness pushing back on just lists and fitting inside of the box, but I know that he's not trying to be exhaustive with all the things that we should kind of have inside of child rearing. But then there's this reality that it's easy to kind of show courage in certain situations or to be courteous to people. And these different things inside of this list of 21 qualities, is it helpful for parents and kids?
It's such an interesting dilemma, right? Because my newest book, Parent Differently, Raise Kids with Biblical Character That Changes Culture, includes 48 character qualities and a list of my baker's dozen, the top 13 that I believe need to be prioritized given the Christ-likeness we want in our children and the chaotic culture in which we're raising them. So I have to say I'm a fan of appropriate lists if accompanying the list is the how do I make it happen? You know, a list without support can make people feel so guilty and so badly that they haven't done it well yet. So I would say read the list. I actually think it's quite good. There are overlapping qualities both on my list and his. And I think it gives us a benchmark to look for. And yet it can be really overwhelming. So here's what I would say to the dads. What are your family values? Who are you? Who is your family? Your family was ordained by the Lord. You are together for a reason. Who do you want your children to be? Is courage a quality that you value? Then raise up your kids to be that. And I would also say that, you know, the question that you were asking, or the question could be asked, is it appropriate to be courageous at all times? Is it necessary to be courteous to all people? What I say in my new book about character is that character is not something we have, it's something we are. And my goal would be that we are discerning, we are courteous, we are courageous, we are patient, we are grateful. So the challenge for me is, am I courteous to all people? Like, do I treat the person in line at the airport the same way that I would treat a niece? I think there ought to be some consistency there, and I think that can be the real challenge for people.
So I like that, Dr. Kathy, and I think the list for me is a little bit unique maybe because lists always get lost for me. When I go to the grocery store with a list, I always end up with more things in the bag than actually are on the list, or less things than are on the list. So I wrestle a little bit with lists, but I'd like to hear maybe a sneak peek into your list of 12. And what are some maybe kind of snapshot examples of things that we could kind of do to build in those character qualities for our kids?
Yeah, I can share that. It starts with being like Jesus. So do we know Jesus? Do we know the God of the Bible, and do we understand what he says about character? Have we read Proverbs, and do we understand the difference between the wise one and the foolish one? I would certainly recommend our listeners go there, an Old Testament book right in the middle of the Bible. I think that it's a heart and mind issue. I think character matters because the heart is the wellspring of life. And all that we are and all that we do is both our heart and our mind. So if I were to put a list together of heart qualities, character qualities, on my list, 3 of the really important ones are self-respect, because it guarantees I want the other qualities, self-control, because it guarantees I can use the qualities, and respect for others, because it motivates me, again, to use the qualities, because life is not about me. It's about relationships I have and honoring people. Joy and gratitude. The research says joy and gratitude give rise to obedience. So in my list, I prioritize joy and gratitude. Do we model those for our children? Do we not just expect mandatory thank you notes after a gift, but do we live a life of true gratitude? And when sometimes I'm asked, how do I lead my children into that? And let me say that leading is walking with. Leading is not walking ahead of and simply demonstrating who we want them to be. But if you look up leading in a dictionary, it's walking with, side by side, demonstrating who we are. Like, are we good people? You're not going to be a better parent than you are a person. So are you a decent man, a decent woman? If the moms are listening to this, I'm sure they are. And then will we be able to walk with our children so that they understand the value of the qualities that we're exhibiting?
So Dr. Kathy, I really appreciate that. And I think that's kind of a list that I could kind of attack. It's 3 things on the list. I can go to the store kind of and get that, so to speak. But maybe I should kind of explain to you why I have such a problem with grocery store lists. And maybe you can kind of tell my wife about this a little bit. But I feel like whenever somebody creates a grocery store list, they do it because they want to get the items that are on the list for themselves. And I think sometimes maybe in parenting, we create lists maybe for our kids of traits that we want to see them exhibit, maybe a little bit for ourselves. So I'd like to hear you kind of speak to this idea of when we look at creating kind of lists like this, lists or qualities or characteristics we would like to kind of infuse maybe into our kids, to use that word. What would be kind of a kid-centric way of approaching this? What traits would kids say that they would like to have? What are your thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Let's ask them. Right? Let's ask them. Let's sit our kids down and, we set up the context and, maybe we have a list of a bunch of qualities, including from appendices in my books, or you can, create your own list or get a list off of Google if you want. But ask the kids, who do you want to be? What kind of a person do you want to be remembered for? If they've had someone pass away, you could even say, at a funeral, what would you love people to say about you? It's interesting when I ask young people that, do they want to say they were super successful in their business? Or again, do they want to be hearing things like, boy, they walked with God and honored him and all that they did? So let's ask the kids what they value. I would say in our culture, kindness and compassion are huge. Compassion is huge. Compassion for the confused, compassion for the overwhelmed, compassion for the lost, compassion for those in a different economic state. So to have compassion, have gratitude, to be courageous, to be discerning, these are qualities that I think are important. And let's see if our kids would say that. And if they don't, then let's teach them why what we value matters so that they invest with us.
I really love where Dr. Kathy brings us on this topic. It's something that I think is important for us to talk about here in the Celebrate Kids podcast. And my heart in this reflects a lot of what we find in 1 Samuel 1 and 2. It's the part of scripture where Hannah bears the prophet Samuel. And in this moment, Hannah is expected to kind of carry a certain look or perspective or traits as a young woman in that time period. But Hannah's devotion is to the Lord. And out of response for the way that the Lord answers her prayer, Hannah prays this prayer. And this is what's recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 2. Then Hannah prayed and said, "My heart rejoices in the Lord. In the Lord my horn is lifted high. My mouth boasts over my enemies, for I delight in your deliverance. There is no one holy like you, Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. Do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. The bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who are hungry no more. She who was barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pines away. The Lord brings death and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and raises up. The Lord sends poverty and wealth, and he humbles and he exalts. He raises the poor from the dust, and he lifts the needy from the ash heap. He seats them with princes and has them inherit a throne of honor. For the foundations of the earth are the Lord's. On them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful servants, but the wicked will be silenced in the place of darkness. It is not by strength that one prevails. Those who oppose the Lord, they will be broken. The Most High will thunder from heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt a horn of his anointed. There's so much more that goes on in this story that I wish we could talk about, but we don't have time necessarily right now to unpack it. But I think that the way that Hannah unpacks her anguish in not meeting kind of the cultural expectations that the culture had set out for her, and actually the refocusing of her expectations to be ones that fall underneath and are subservient to the Lord and his design and plan. Well, I just think that the testimony of Hannah is something that is a bright light that shines and cuts through dark moments. And it's a bright light for us as we look forward to this next week, no matter what place the Lord has you in. May your heart be like Hannah's that just seeks to honor and serve the Lord. And that will be a bright light for whatever cultural context you're in. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast in our daily segment, Facing the Dark today. My name's Wayne Stender, and on behalf of Dr. Kathy, I want to say thanks for listening, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.